They dragged Ada Whitlock through the snow the night before Christmas, a rope biting her wrists, a crowd chanting "Beast" like it was her given name. Blood dripped from her cheek where the sheriff's men struck her, just enough to mark her, not enough to kill her. Not yet. At her feet, a small boy clung to her torn coat. Noah wasn't her son, but he was the only reason she still breathed. "Bring the torch," the sheriff ordered. "We end her tonight." But before the flame touched her skin, a single gunshot cut the winter clean in half. A black rancher rode through the mob like judgment itself, snow exploding beneath his horse. "The next man who lays a hand on her," he said, voice steady as God's promise, "answers to me. She's my woman. Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment the city you're watching from so I know how far this truth travels." Snow bit into her knees when they forced her down. The rope burned through her wrists again, fresh fire over old scars. Blood slid from the corner of Ada Whitlock's mouth and fell onto the wooden platform, dark against the white December frost. She didn't wipe it. She didn't look up. The crowd in Whitehawk Crossing didn't deserve her eyes. "Beast!" someone shouted. "Show her face! Hang her before the bells ring!" Ada bowed her head. The wind cut like knives across the square, carrying pine smoke, torch smoke, and the sharp sound of hatred. It was Christmas week. The season folks claimed to honor Mercy. Yet Mercy had never lived long in Whitehawk. Not for her. Not for the boy clinging to her sleeve. Noah didn't cry. He hadn't cried since the cellar. His small fingers wrapped the fabric at her elbow, knuckles white, chest rising too fast. When the sheriff's men dragged her forward, he stumbled with her, breath thin as thread. Ada used her shoulder to shield him from a boot aimed too close. Sheriff Harlan Pruitt stepped onto the platform like a preacher stepping to the altar. His coat swung open, showing the silver star and the silver ring he loved more. "Citizens," he called, "the law stands firm today. This woman is declared incompetent and unfit. The boy is without guardianship. Both fall under my charge." Boos rose. Snowflakes drifted like ashes. Ada tasted blood again. She kept her voice low. "Stay behind me, Noah. Don't let go." The sheriff raised a folded paper. "This here is the writ, signed and sealed. Anyone aiding this creature is aiding a criminal. The boy returns to my protection after the sale." Sale. The word struck like a fist. Ada felt Noah tense, felt him searching for breath. Then it happened. The boy's hand slipped. Something wrapped in blue cloth fell from his coat and thudded against the boards. The sheriff's eyes snapped to it. All color drained from his face. Ada grabbed Noah, shoving the cloth back under his coat with bound hands. But the sheriff had already seen enough. His jaw tightened. His voice lowered to a growl only she could hear. "You should have burned that when you had the chance." The mob pressed in. A torch waved too close. Someone tugged her hair. Ada braced herself. If they took the boy from her now, she would not live to see the next hymn sung in this town. A single set of hoofbeats cut through the chaos. Not hurried, not angry, just certain. The crowd parted when the rider entered the square. Parted because something in the way he sat the saddle told them they should. Snow steamed on the back of his coat. A black horse breathed like a furnace beneath him. He swung down without hurry, boots striking the ground with the calm weight of a man who had buried more than fear. Caleb Reed didn't reach for his gun, didn't raise his voice. He simply walked toward Ada and Noah until the sheriff's nearest man lifted a pistol, and then Caleb stopped, looked at the man once, and the pistol lowered on its own. "Sir," the sheriff spat, "this is county business." Caleb ignored him. His eyes were on the rope cutting Ada's wrists, on the boy curled behind her, on the snow streaked with blood. "How much?" he asked. The sheriff blinked. "What?" Caleb's voice stayed flat. "How much for the woman?" A hush dropped. The torches hissed. Even the wind seemed to hold breath. The sheriff laughed. Too loud. "You want her? You want the beast?" Caleb's gaze sharpened. "She's my woman, and the boy's with me." Gasps rippled through the square like a storm over dry grass. The sheriff tried to puff himself taller. "You can't just—" "I can." Caleb placed a leather pouch on the platform. Coin clinked. "You wanted a sale. There it is." Ada stared at him. She didn't know this man. Didn't know why he would risk anything for a stranger, the ruined face and a hunted child. But when he offered his hand, not touching, just offering, Noah reached for it first. Caleb lifted the boy onto his horse, then looked to Ada. "Ma'am," he said, voice low enough only the three of them heard. "You want out of here, you step toward me. You don't. I walk away. Choice is yours." Choice. A word she had not heard in years. Ada rose. Slow. Pain flashing through every limb. She stepped toward him. The crowd roared in outrage, but she kept moving until she felt the warmth of the horse and the shadow of Caleb standing guard. The sheriff leaned close as Caleb mounted. "You don't know what she's hiding. The boy neither. Bring them back before nightfall, and I'll forget this." Caleb didn't answer. He nudged the horse forward. Snow kicked up behind them. As they rode out of the square, Noah's small voice broke. "Ada, are we going back?" "No," she whispered. "We are not." Behind them, the church bell rang for Christmas week. It sounded nothing like mercy. The snow deepened as they left Whitlock crossing behind, swallowing horse tracks and torchlight until the world narrowed to wind and breath. Caleb Reed didn't look back. Men who meant harm never chased with noise. They followed quiet, like wolves. Ada kept her arms tight around Noah, his small chest pressed against her ribs. Every few seconds she felt the tremor in his breathing. Not fear, cold. She tried to shift the blanket over him with bound hands, but the knot tore at her skin again. Caleb glanced over his shoulder. "You holding on, ma'am?" She didn't answer. He wasn't asking for her comfort's sake. He was calculating distance, speed, how long before the sheriff sent riders. Noah coughed once. A thin, sharp sound. Caleb halted the horse so fast, Ada jerked forward. He reached up. "Let me take him." Ada stiffened, but Noah sagged into Caleb's arms before she could protest. The boy's forehead touched Caleb's coat, and Caleb's jaw clenched like a mom hearing a verdict. "He's burning cold," Caleb muttered. "Needs heat. Needs broth. Needs a roof." Ada swallowed. "We can't go back to town." "Wasn't planning to." Caleb shifted Noah, settling him close against his chest. "There's a place 5 miles ahead. My place." Ada stared. "Why help us?" Caleb didn't answer. He clicked the reins and turned the horse toward the ridge. They rode through a pass where the wind screamed between the rocks. Lantern light flickered across the snow, showing glimpses of pine roots, dead weeds, the hint of tracks behind them. Ada saw them too, prints too fresh to ignore. "They're following," she whispered. Caleb didn't flinch. "I know." He said it the way other men said prayers, quiet, resigned, certain of what came next. At the base of the ridge, he slowed the horse and nodded to a gap in the rocks. "We stop here." Ada slid off, landing hard. Caleb dismounted, lifted Noah again, and passed him to her like passing a newborn. She cradled the boy, feeling heat under the cold. Caleb knelt beside a cluster of stones and struck flint. Sparks caught on dry moss. Flame licked upward, faint but steady. He set his gun and his knife aside, far from her reach, but also far from hers. A quiet message. "I'm not your enemy." Ada eased Noah down, wrapping him in Caleb's coat. The boy's lashes fluttered. She brushed snow from his hair. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't hide it. "You ever been out this far?" Caleb asked without looking up. "No." "Good. Sheriff's men get lost past the ridge. They don't trust the land." He fed a pine branch into the flames. "Land don't care. It'll swallow any man the same." Ada didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. The fire grew. Color returned to Noah's cheeks, faint as a winter dawn. Caleb watched the flames a long moment. "He'll make it through the night," he finally said. "But he won't last 2 more unless he eats." Ada tightened her grip around Noah. "We can't risk a town. Not again. There's a trading post on the other side of the creek. Small, quiet. I'll get what we need, and we move." "You'll show your face," Ada said. "They'll recognize you. Sheriff will hear." Caleb's eyes lifted to hers, dark, firm, unbothered. "Ma'am, a man's got to choose who he fears. I fear disappointing the Lord more than I fear Sheriff Pruitt. Christmas week or not, that man's forgotten the difference between law and sin." The words didn't preach. They landed like iron. Ada looked away, back at Noah. The boy stirred, whispered something. Caleb leaned in. "What did he say?" Ada hesitated. "He asked if we're safe." Caleb didn't smile. "Not yet. But we will be." Snow thickened. The wind shifted. Caleb listened to it the way hunters listen to brush. He rose, dusted off his gloves. They're closer, he said quietly. We ride now. Ada wrapped Noah tighter. Caleb lifted her onto the saddle first this time, placing the boy in her arms before swinging up behind them. His coat shielded them both. She felt the heat and the weight and the strange, steady calm of him. The kind of calm men earned by surviving graves meant for them. They moved through the dark until a lantern glowed ahead, a single square of light breaking the winter night. A girl's voice called out from the porch. "Pa? That you?" Caleb steered toward the cabin. "Lila," he called back. "Open the door." Ada blinked. His daughter. The door swung wide. Warm light spilled onto the snow. Lila froze when she saw Ada. Then her gaze dropped to Noah, pale in her arms. "Pa," she whispered, "someone followed you." Caleb's hand settled on Ada's shoulder, steady as a vow. "Then we'll handle them. First, we get the boy warm." Ada didn't know this house, didn't know its rules. But when Caleb helped her down and guided her toward the door, she stepped inside anyway. Anything was safer than the square behind her. The wind slammed the door shut. The wolves were still out there. But for the first time in years, Ada felt heat on her skin. The warmth inside the cabin hit her like a blow. Ada blinked hard. Fire crackled in the stone hearth, throwing light over shelves of canned peaches, a worn Bible on the table, and a quilt draped across a rocker. It looked like a place where ordinary people lived, where nights didn't end in fear. Lila shut the door fast, sliding the wooden bar into place. "Pa," she said quietly, "I counted 3 riders on the ridge." Caleb pulled off his gloves. "They won't come down yet. Storm's building." Ada set Noah on a bench near the fire. The boy leaned into her, half asleep, half freezing. She tried to loosen the rope around her wrists, but her fingers had lost feeling. Caleb knelt beside her without a word and cut the rope with a pocket knife. Ada jerked at the touch of freedom. Rope marks surged angry and red across her skin. "Ma'am," he said, "you're safe in my house." She didn't reply. Safety was a thing men said to make themselves feel righteous. She watched Noah's chest instead, counting each rise, each fall. Lila brought a bowl of broth, steam rising in thin curls. She hesitated before handing it to Ada, as if unsure whether Ada could be trusted with anything warm. Ada took it anyway and held it to Noah's lips. The boy sipped once, twice, then rested his head against her shoulder. She brushed a thumb across his brow. Lila's eyes narrowed. "Where'd you two come from?" Before Ada could answer, Caleb spoke. "Lila." "That's not a woman," Lila shot back, voice sharp as a thawed blade. "That's the one they called the beast." Ada didn't flinch. She'd heard worse in louder places. She stood, steadying herself on the edge of the table. "No one here calls her that," Caleb said. His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "And no one calls a child a burden in this house." Lila looked away, cheeks flushed. Ada bowed her head. "We won't stay long." Caleb stepped closer. "You'll stay till morning. Storm's coming hard." As if summoned, the wind hammered the walls, rattling the window shutters. Snow hissed along the roof. Noah stirred at the sound, breath catching. Ada drew him close again. "He hates the dark," she murmured. "He's not in the dark," Caleb replied. He lifted a lantern from the shelf and placed it near the bench. Flame steady inside the glass. "Light stays on tonight." The simple act struck deeper than any promise. Ada's hands shook. She hid them under Noah's blanket. A knock split the room, one, hard, not a friendly knock. Lila backed toward the kitchen, reaching for the old shotgun hung above the stove. Caleb moved first, extinguishing the lantern nearest the door and motioning Ada behind the staircase. Deputy Young's voice drifted through the wood. "Evening, Reed. I come with a writ." Ada's spine turned to ice. Noah clutched her coat, small fingers digging in. Caleb opened the door just wide enough to face the deputy. Wind rushed in, tearing at the fire. "You picked a storm to ride through," Caleb said. Deputy Young lifted a paper. "Sheriff says the woman's incompetent. Boys to be returned. Lawful transfer. You know how it is." "I know misuse of the law when I see it." The deputy shifted, eyes darting past Caleb toward the shadows inside. "Reed, I got orders." "Step inside if you want to freeze," Caleb said, pushing the door wider. Deputy Young hesitated, then entered. Snow clung to his hat and collar. He stared at the marks on Ada's wrists, at Noah tucked beneath her coat, at Lila holding the shotgun but aiming low. "This ain't right," he muttered. Caleb crossed his arms. "Then fix it." The deputy swallowed. "Sheriff wants both back before dawn." Ada's throat tightened. Noah began counting under his breath. Silent, rapid, the way he did when fear cornered him. Then the boy's foot knocked something loose. The blue cloth. It slipped from Ada's coat and fell at the deputy's feet. Deputy Young froze. He'd seen it before. In the sheriff's office. In the file no one was meant to open. Ada reached for it, but the deputy bent faster. "What's in here?" he whispered. Ada didn't answer. Noah stepped forward, tiny shoulders squared. "I'll tell you," he said softly. "If you don't take her." Deputy Young stared at him, a storm behind his eyes. He opened the cloth. Inside lay the metal band with the blood-darkened engraving, a name the sheriff pretended had never lived. "Lord have mercy," the deputy breathed. Outside, thunder rolled across the snowfields, strange thunder with no lightning. Not thunder. Hooves. Riders. Deputy Young shut the cloth fast and backed toward the door. "Reed," he said, voice cracking. "You got an hour, maybe less. Sheriff's coming himself." Caleb stepped in front of Ada and Noah. "Then we prepare." The deputy slipped out into the storm. The door slammed shut. The wind howled like a thing unleashed. Ada tightened her hold on Noah as the cabin trembled. This night wouldn't end without blood. But for the first time, it might not be theirs. The storm hit before midnight. Wind slammed the cabin so hard the rafters groaned. Snow whipped against the shutters, filling every crack with a mournful whistle. The fire sputtered, fighting for breath like a man drowning in white. Ada pulled Noah closer. His skin had warmed, but fear made him tremble again. Every time the wind rose, he flinched, as if expecting a cellar door to slam. Caleb grabbed his coat. "Stay inside," he said. "Horses spook easy in storms. I need to bring them in." Lila shook her head. "Pa, don't." But he was already opening the door, leaning into the blizzard as if stepping into another world. Snow swallowed him in seconds. Ada watched the door close. The iron latch shuddered. She stood, pacing once, twice. Her wrists burned from the rope cuts, but she ignored them. Another gust hit, sharper than before. Then faint. Something else. Footsteps. Not Caleb's. Lila stiffened. "Behind the barn," she whispered. "I heard it earlier." Ada moved to the window, but the frost blurred everything. She saw only shadows writhing in the storm. Noah tugged her sleeve. "Ada, don't leave." "I'm not," she whispered. "I'm right here." But the truth clawed at her. If someone was out there, watching, waiting, the storm gave cover for any sin. Minutes dragged. The wind rose higher, and Caleb still hadn't returned. Ada's breath shortened. "He's been too long." Lila's eyes widened. "Pa knows these lands." Ada didn't answer. Wolves knew the land too. So did men with empty souls. A violent crash sounded outside. A muffled thud, then silence. Ada didn't think. She grabbed the coil of rope near the door, tied one end around her waist, then tied the other around Noah. The boy's fingers were clumsy, but he helped, looping the knot the way she had taught him in the cellar years ago. "Stay close," she said. Lila pulled a lantern from the hook. "I'm coming too." "No light outside," Ada said. "It'll give us away." Lila hesitated, then left it burning near the hearth. A beacon for return. Ada opened the door. The storm clawed at them instantly, stealing breath and warmth. Snow spun sideways, thick as cotton. She forced her boots into the drift, holding Noah's hand tight, the rope taut between them. They moved toward the barn. Snow blinded them. Wind drowned every sound except their own gasps. Twice Ada stumbled. Twice Noah steadied her with a grip too strong for his small body. Then she saw it. A dark shape in the snow. Too still to be an animal. "Caleb!" Lila cried, rushing ahead. Ada dropped to her knees beside him. His face was half buried, eyes closed, a gash across his temple seeping into the drifts. Blood looked black against the white. His coat was crusted with ice. Ada pressed her fingers to his neck. A beat. Slow, but there. "We have to move him," she said. The storm roared louder, drowning her words, but Lila understood. Together they hooked their arms under his shoulders and hauled. Caleb was heavy, dead weight in the cold. Noah moved to help, trying to push at his boots, but the snow came up to his knees. "Back inside!" Ada shouted. "Now!" They dragged Caleb toward the faint glow of the cabin window. The rope between Ada and Noah tightened and loosened with each lurch, guiding them like a lifeline. By the time they stumbled through the door, Ada's arms shook. Lila slammed the door shut, barring it with the wooden beam. Wind screamed against it, furious. Ada lowered Caleb to the floor near the fire. Heat licked at his boots, melting frost. She brushed snow from his hair, revealing the wound, deep, jagged, still bleeding. She frowned. Something about the mark wasn't from a fall, more like a blow. Noah stood silent, staring at Caleb's stillness, the way a child stares at a grave being dug. Ada swallowed. Lila, water, thread, needle. Lila ran. Ada wiped the blood with trembling hands. The wound opened under her touch. She steadied herself. Her breath shuddered, but her hands did not. She had stitched worse things in darker places. She lifted the cloth from her own face, first time in any man's home in years, and bent close to see. "Ma'am," Caleb whispered. Ada froze. His eyes cracked open, unfocused but aware. His voice scraped like gravel. "You came back." Ada blinked hard. "You were dying." He tried to smile, but pain swallowed it. "Thought I told you. Stay inside." "You tell me many things," Ada muttered. "I don't listen to all of them." His hand lifted weakly, catching her wrist, not holding, just guiding her stitch. His thumb brushed the old rope scar. "You're shaking," he said. "It's the cold," she lied. Outside, a shadow passed the window. No hoofbeat, no call. Just presence. Lila whispered, "Someone's out there." Ada tied the final knot in the stitch and reached for the rifle leaning against the hearth. The storm raged, the house breathed, and the night waited for blood. The storm eased just enough for hoofbeats to carry. Ada heard them first, a distant thud, then another, then many. Snow muffled some, but the pattern was unmistakable. Men riding hard, and not for mercy. Caleb tried to lift himself. Pain dragged him back down. Ada pushed him gently against the wall. "Don't move," she said. He exhaled once, slow. "They're coming for the boy. And for you." Lila peered through the shutter. Her breath fogged the pain. "6 riders," she whispered. "Sheriff's with 'em." Ada's stomach knotted. She checked the rope tying Noah to her waist. Habit from too many escapes. Noah clutched her coat, counting under his breath. She touched his hair, a brief anchor in a world breaking open. Caleb's voice roughened. "Ada, whatever happens, stay behind me." She didn't answer, because she wasn't going to. A fist pounded the door, hard enough to shake dust from the rafters. "Ada Whitlock!" Sheriff Pruitt's voice cut through the storm. "By authority of the county and the writ recorded this morning, you and the boy belong to the law. Step outside." Noah stiffened. Lila grabbed the shotgun. Caleb pushed himself upright, one hand braced on the table, the other reaching for his gun holster. Ada felt something burn through her. Familiar, unwelcome, necessary. The same fire that had kept her alive in cellars and alleys and places where God's name was only said by dying people. She stepped toward the door. Caleb's voice dropped. Ma'am, hold him, Ada told Lila. Lila blinked. What? No, he... Hold him, Caleb growled. Ada. But the sheriff slammed the door again. Open it, Ada said. Caleb cursed under his breath. You can't face him. I already have. Ada lifted her chin. And tonight I finish it. Caleb looked at her. The unveiled scars. The determination he hadn't asked for, but now couldn't stop. And he nodded once. A soldier's nod. A believer's nod. A man accepting whatever judgment God set before him. Ada unbarred the door. Cold ripped into the cabin. Snow swirled around the figures on horseback. Sheriff Pruitt sat at the front, silver ring gleaming under the lanterns. His eyes dragged over her face, hungry with cruelty. Well, he drawled, look at you. Beast found herself a den. Ada stepped onto the porch. Let the boy alone. The sheriff smirked. The boy's evidence, and evidence belongs to me. Ada didn't blink. No, evidence belongs in the ground it came from. The sheriff stiffened. His hand twitched near his gun. Behind Ada, Lila cocked the shotgun, metal clicking loud in the winter air. Caleb limped to the doorway, shoulders squared, gun low but ready. Sheriff, he said, you come here with a writ, but you're not taking anyone. Pruitt sneered. I have the law. You have paper, Caleb replied. Law's something different. Noah stepped beside Ada before she could stop. Him. His small voice trembled, but the words didn't. She's not a beast. Silence rippled through the storm. One of the deputies shifted. Another cursed under his breath. Sheriff Pruitt laughed once, sharp. Boy, you don't know what she hid. You don't know. Noah cut him off. I know what you did. Ada's breath caught. Caleb's grip tightened on his gun. Even the storm paused. The boy reached into Ada's coat and drew out the blue cloth. Take it, he said to the deputy nearest the sheriff. Open it. Deputy Young slid off his horse. His hands shook as he unraveled the cloth. When the metal band fell into his palm, glinting with dried blood and a name once spoken by good men, his face drained white. Sheriff, he whispered, this is Hartman's. The man who... Shut up, Pruitt barked. But the deputy didn't. Couldn't. He turned to Caleb, then to Ada, then to the boy who had carried the truth like a wound. Sheriff, Deputy Young said, voice cracking under the weight of conscience, I can't enforce this writ. Pruitt lunged for his gun. A shot rang out, not from the sheriff's hand, but from behind Ada. Mei Lu stood at the edge of the trees, lantern in one hand, derringer smoking in the other, snow settling on her shoulders like judgment. I saw your riders pass, she said. Didn't like the look of 'em. The sheriff's gun spun from his grasp, landing in the snow. Chaos broke. Not loud, just decisive. The sheriff's men hesitated. A pause became doubt. Doubt became distance. No one wanted to back a dying tyrant in a holy season. Pruitt snarled. You're siding with a monster? Mei Lu's eyes hardened. Only monster here is the man afraid of the truth. Ada stepped forward, snow closing around her boots. You know where the body is, Sheriff? The tree by the old river road. The roots don't lie. A murmur spread among the riders. Deputy Young swallowed. We dig. Now. Caleb moved beside Ada, steady as a vow. We go together. The sheriff lunged again, but 3 hands grabbed him at once. Shackles clamped over his wrists. His silver ring clattered into the snow. Ada didn't look at him. She looked at Noah, and Noah finally breathed steady. The storm howled above them, but something heavier had broken. The town would face the truth before dawn. They rode before dawn. Lanterns swung from saddle horns, casting thin gold over the snow-packed trail. Breath steamed from horses. Men who had once cheered the sheriff now rode in silence, their shame trailing behind them like smoke from a dying fire. Ada rode beside Caleb's wagon, Noah wrapped in her coat, his head against her shoulder. He watched the sheriff, bound, hands shackled, silver ring gone, being dragged toward the river road by 2 deputies. His boots left uneven tracks. No one spoke. The sky shifted from black to bruised gray. Wind pressed in, carrying the scent of frozen water and pine. Deputy Young dismounted first. He approached the old cottonwood where the river once ran deep in spring. Its roots twisted through the snow like ribs. "This is the place?" he asked. Ada nodded. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The men began to dig. Frozen earth fought them, hard as iron. Shovels rang against stones. Snow washed over their shoulders, collecting in their hair. Minutes dragged. Then metal struck wood. Deputy Young fell to his knees, brushed snow aside, exposed the edge of a broken crate. "Lord, forgive us," he whispered. The crate split under his hands. Inside lay what Ada had carried in fear for years: bone, cloth, metal, the remnants of a man who died because he knew something he shouldn't. The ring's engraving matched the one wrapped in Noah's cloth. Sheriff Pruitt cursed through his gag. He thrashed, eyes wild with the knowledge there was no more running left to him. One of his own men stepped back, full of disgust. "You lied," he muttered. "All this time, you lied." Caleb limped forward, leaning on a branch like a crutch. "You killed a man for land, buried him like an animal." The sheriff spat into the snow. Ada stepped closer. Noah held her coat tighter, but she stood straight. Snowflakes clung to her lashes, her scars, her breath. "You took his life," she said quietly, "then tried to take mine, tried to take his son." Noah looked up, shock flickering in his eyes, but Ada kept her gaze on the sheriff. "You called me a beast," she whispered, "but you're the only creature here." Deputy Young removed his hat. "We'll bring a reverend, a proper burial. And you," he looked at the sheriff, "will stand trial at first light." The sheriff snarled behind the gag, bending like a trapped animal. No one stepped forward to defend him. Not this time. Not ever again. Ada kneeled by the crate, resting her palm on the cold wood. "You can rest now," she murmured to the bones. "Your boy is safe." Noah's breath hitched. He wasn't crying. Noah rarely cried. But he leaned into Ada, small shoulders shaking once. Caleb stood beside them, silent, hat over his chest. Snow fell thicker. The light grew. Men lifted the remains gently, wrapping them in canvas, as if trying to repay an old sin with new reverence. They loaded the sheriff into a wagon and turned back toward Whitehawk. Only Ada, Caleb, Noah, and Lila remained. Ada faced the rising sun. "We go home," she said. Caleb didn't correct her. He only adjusted his coat around Noah and reached a hand toward Ada, not touching, just offering, the way he had the night he claimed her before the mob. She took it. They rode slow. The storm had passed but left drifts deep enough to swallow wheels. Pines bowed under white weight. The cabin roof gleamed through the trees like a lantern calling them in. Inside, the fire was still warm. Ada set Noah on the rocker. He curled up with the blanket, breathing soft for the first time in days. Lila poured water, watching Ada with something no longer suspicion, something nearly respect. Caleb leaned against the table, wound stitched tight, weakness in his stance but not in his eyes. "You're free now," he said. Ada shook her head. "Freedom isn't a place, it's people." Caleb studied her. "Then stay, both of you." Noah looked up. Ada said nothing at first. She walked to the hearth, reached for the cloth she'd always used to hide her face, folded it once, twice. Then she fed it to the fire. Flame caught quickly, curling the fabric into glowing edges. The scars on her cheek reflected in the blaze, not hidden, not explained, just hers. When she turned back, Caleb was watching her like a man seeing the answer to a prayer he never dared speak. Noah climbed off the rocker and crossed the room to her. He took her hand, small fingers wrapping around her own. "This is home now?" he asked. Ada glanced at Caleb, at the fire, at the sturdy walls holding against winter. "Yes," she said. "This is home." Outside, the last of the storm died. Inside, nothing hunted them anymore. And in a land that once renamed her a beast, she finally carried a name of her own, home. The 13th dawn broke pale over Whitehawk. Frost clung to every window. Smoke climbed from chimneys like thin prayers. And in the street outside the church house, people gathered, quiet, uneasy, waiting for a trial the town had spent years avoiding. Ada stepped from the wagon first. No veil hid her scars now. No rope bound her wrists. Snow crunched under her boots, steady, deliberate. She held Noah's hand, his small fingers cold but sure. Caleb walked beside them, jaw set, coat pulled tight against the wind. The scar above his brow glinted faintly in the winter light. The crowd parted, not out of kindness, out of guilt, out of fear that truth carried weight heavier than any bullet. Ada kept her eyes forward. Voices whispered as she passed. "Is that her? Looks different without the cloth. Thought she'd be worse. Lord have mercy." Ada didn't flinch. She had heard worse words in darker rooms, and this time she wasn't standing alone. Inside the church house, the floorboards moaned under the weight of townsfolk packed shoulder to shoulder. Mei Lu stood near the front, arms crossed, daring anyone to speak against what she'd seen. Josiah the blacksmith filled an entire pew by himself, hammer tucked in his belt like a warning. At the far end of the room, bound to a chair, sat former Sheriff Pruitt. His hair was matted, his jaw bruised. He still tried to smile, but it broke wrong, like a lie that finally realized it had run out of breath. Deputy Young stood at his side, papers in hand. When Ada entered, he straightened. "Ma'am," he said softly. Ada nodded. Noah climbed onto the bench beside her. His feet didn't touch the floor. He kept glancing at Pruitt. Not afraid, not brave, just watching the way a child watches a storm it survived. Reverend Clay opened a worn book. "We begin," he said. Testimonies came one by one. Minors who'd feared speaking, women who'd been threatened, men who'd looked the other way when it suited them. Their voices cracked as they told the truth. Then Deputy Young presented the evidence. The ring, the cloth, the bones laid to rest behind the church. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The room shifted as if a cold wind had passed through the rafters. Pruitt laughed, a hollow, splintered sound. "You fools! You think she's innocent? Look at her!" He jerked his head toward Ada. "She's the one who—" Ada rose. The room fell still. She didn't raise her voice. "I survived you. That's the truth you can't stand." Pruitt strained against the ropes. "You think they'll trust a face like yours? Girl, these people—" Caleb stepped forward. His shadow fell over Pruitt. "Watch your mouth." Pruitt's sneer faltered. Ada continued. "You hid behind the law to bury a man and break his family. You stole his land, then hunted his child. And when I wouldn't disappear, you called me beast so no one would listen." Her hands didn't shake. Her breath didn't tremble. The town listened. For the first time. Reverend Clay cleared his throat. "The evidence is plain. The testimony is sufficient. Harlan Pruitt, you stand stripped of office and bound for the territorial court." Pruitt lunged, chair and all. 2 men pinned him. He shouted curses until the gag silenced him. Ada didn't look at him again. Caleb touched her elbow, a small, grounding gesture. She didn't pull away. When they stepped outside, the sun finally broke the clouds. Snowflakes glittered like cracked glass. A woman approached timidly. Ada recognized her, one of the townsfolk who had shouted "beast" months before. The woman swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I didn't know. I'm sorry." Ada held her gaze. Not with forgiveness, not with hatred. Just a clear, steady truth. "You know now." The woman nodded and backed away. Caleb exhaled. "You handled that better than most men would." Ada shrugged. "Survival teaches patience." Noah tugged her coat. "Ada, Can we go home now? Home. The word warmed the cold morning more than the sun. Yes, she said, we can. As they walked back to the wagon, townsfolk stepped aside, not out of fear this time, but out of something quieter, something like respect. Caleb helped Ada into the seat. Noah climbed onto her lap. The reins creaked in Caleb's hands. Behind them, the church bell tolled once, a clean sound, a winter truth. Ada looked toward the hills where the cabin waited. This time she didn't hide her face from the wind. And the town, for the first time since she'd been dragged from its alleys and cellars, didn't turn away. Snow softened by afternoon sun lay untouched around the Reed Ranch, a white sheet pulled over the past few months. Wind moved gently through the pines, shaking loose tiny crystals that drifted like fallen prayers. Ada stepped out of the cabin with a basket of laundry. Noah followed, dragging a small stool through the snow so he could reach the clothesline. He worked with quiet purpose, the way children do when they are learning how to belong. Not too close to the edge, Ada murmured. He shifted the stool back an inch. Caleb watched from the porch, thumb running along the grain of a new fence board he planned to set into place. The trial had ended. Pruitt sent under guard toward the territorial court, the town shaken awake by the truth it had buried. Life wasn't normal. It was simply beginning. Ada handed Noah a cloth. He clipped it with mittened fingers. One snap. Another. They fluttered in the wind like flags from a country he'd never known but finally claimed him. Caleb walked down the steps. His boots sank deep. Need a hand? Ada shook her head. We have it. He nodded. He didn't offer twice. He'd learned she didn't need saving now, only space, steady ground, and someone who didn't flinch at the sight of her scars. Noah tugged the hem of Ada's coat. Can we make bread when we're done? Yes. With honey? If we have enough. Caleb cleared his throat. I brought some from town. Mei Lu insisted. Ada paused. Why? Said she owed you sweetness after a winter that wasn't. He shrugged. Her words. Ada lifted the last sheet into place. Her breath clouded. Her hands stilled for a moment longer than needed. People change fast when they see a body in the ground, she muttered. Caleb set the fence board aside. Some do, some don't, but enough did. Ada didn't argue. She tied the basket, slung it over her arm, and walked toward the porch. Caleb stepped aside so she could pass, always giving her the width of a doorway, never claiming it. Inside, the cabin felt warmer than the weather should have allowed. Breadcrumbs from lunch still dotted the table. Lila sat by the stove, sewing fresh patches into an old quilt. She looked up. Town was asking about you, she said to Ada. Ada stiffened. What for? Not trouble, Lila said quickly. Well, Mrs. Thorne asked if you'd sew for her girls again. Ada set the basket down. Again? Lila nodded. Said you were the best she'd had. Said she was ashamed she didn't stand up sooner. Ada didn't answer. She wasn't sure the words were meant for her. Caleb stomped snow off his boots and leaned his coat on the peg. You don't owe them anything. Ada's jaw tightened. I know. But, he added, you can take the work if you want. For you, not for them. Ada turned the thought over in silence. Noah crawled onto the bench, tapping the table with both palms. Bread now? Ada forced a breath. Bread now. They worked in the kitchen as if they'd done it for years. Noah measured flour with too much enthusiasm, sending white dust across the counter. Ada guided his hands gently. Caleb moved beside them, slicing wood for the stove, the rhythm steady, grounding. When the dough rose, the room filled with a warmth that didn't come from fire alone. Caleb leaned against the counter. Town'll hold a gathering tomorrow. Reverend Clay said folks want to say a few words for Hartman. Proper words this time. Ada rolled the dough, slow and even. You want me there? Caleb didn't hesitate. Yes. Ada kept her gaze on the dough. You think they want me? I don't speak for them. He stepped closer, not touching, just near enough that she could feel the truth in his voice. I speak for this house. Ada's hands stilled. The dough sagged slightly. Noah looked between them. Are we a house? Caleb answered first. We're getting there. Noah nodded like that settled it. Ada swallowed once. She wiped flour from her fingers and reached for the loaf pan. I'll go, she said quietly, for the boy's father. Caleb inclined his head. And for yourself. Perhaps. She didn't say. The bread went into the oven. The air thickened with heat and sugar and the faint scent of honey. Noah climbed onto the rocker, humming under his breath, a tune without words, sweet and unsure. Outside, the snow began again. Inside, something steadier than winter took its place. Ada looked toward the window. Her reflection stared back. Not a beast, not a ghost, not a woman with no name. Just Ada. And Ada was enough. Caleb watched her from the stove, a quiet understanding settling in his eyes. The kind men don't speak, only carry. There was more winter ahead, but not the kind she faced alone. The sky cleared the next morning. A thin sun rose over Whitlock, laying pale gold across rooftops still heavy with frost. Smoke drifted upward in straight columns, quiet and steady, like a town trying to breathe again. Ada dressed Noah in his warmest coat. He kept brushing the buttons, nervous the way children are before they face a room full of strangers. Ada helped him wrap the scarf twice around his neck. You'll be fine, she said. He nodded, trying to believe her. Caleb hitched the wagon. Lila climbed in first, blanket over her lap. Ada lifted Noah up, then stepped onto the runner board. Caleb didn't offer his hand. Ada didn't need it. But when her boot slipped slightly on the metal, his hand caught the rail beside hers, close enough to steady, not enough to presume. They rode down the hill toward the church. People gathered outside. Miners, merchants, widows, ranch families, faces Ada had once known only as part of a mob. Today they stood with hats in hand, silence clinging to their collars. A wooden crate rested before the church doors, draped with a white cloth. Reverend Clay waited beside it, Bible pressed to his chest. Caleb reined in the horses. Snow crunched as they stepped down. Ada stared at the crate. Her breath thinned. The last time she'd seen a box like that, it hadn't held dignity. It had held terror. It had held what the sheriff wanted buried. Noah slipped his hand into hers. "We're safe," he whispered. The strength of his voice surprised her. Reverend Clay nodded when they approached. "Miss Whitlock," he said softly, "this belongs to the man your bravery uncovered." Ada kept her eyes on the cloth. He deserved more than this town gave him. "That changes today," the Reverend said. People shifted, making room for her. Ada stared. This was not a space she expected to be offered. But the circle widened until she stood at the front, the cold air trembling with the weight of unspoken apologies. Caleb stood behind her, a silent wall of steadiness. Reverend Clay lifted the cloth. Inside lay the simple coffin, sanded smooth, polished lightly. No luxury, no shame. Just respect. He began reading from the book. Words about truth, justice, mercy, the kind that hit harder in winter when the world seems stripped clean. Ada didn't bow her head. She watched the coffin, watched the crowd, watched the way people's eyes softened, even when they didn't know where to look. When the reading ended, the Reverend stepped back. "Anyone who wishes to speak may do so." Silence collected like snow. Then Josiah the blacksmith stepped forward. "I worked with Hartman," he said. "Didn't know much about him. Wish I'd paid more attention. Wish I'd listened when he tried to warn me. I'll carry that." He returned to the crowd. A woman came next, then a miner, then Mei Liu. But it wasn't their words people remembered. It was Ada's footsteps when she moved toward the coffin. She stopped at the front. The cold bit her cheeks. Her scars burned under the wind. But she held herself straight. "I lived because someone chose to help me," she said quietly. "He didn't owe me anything. He didn't ask for anything. He just acted when others looked away." The crowd listened. Ada placed her hand on the coffin. Her fingers curled once, like a final stitch pulled tight. "You gave your life for the truth," she whispered. "We won't waste it." When she stepped back, Caleb touched the small of her back, not pushing, not guiding, just letting her know she wasn't stepping into the crowd alone. The coffin was carried to the graveyard behind the church. Snow fell as they lowered it into the earth. Ada watched the first shovelful of dirt fall. Her shadow, long, sharp, always behind her, seemed to lighten under the pale sun. Noah slipped his arms around her waist. "Can we go home now?" he asked. Ada breathed out slowly. "Yes, we can." As they walked back to the wagon, several townsfolk nodded to her. Not pity, not fear. Something else. Something she didn't have a name for yet. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. or the beginning of memory without hate. Caleb helped Noah into the seat. Ada climbed beside him. He took the reins, but before flicking them, he looked at her. "You did good," he said. Ada glanced at the graveyard. "He deserved the truth." "And you deserve peace," Caleb said. Snow drifted through the air, gentle and thin. Ada didn't answer. But when the wagon turned toward the hills, she leaned back against the seat. Not guarded, not braced, simply resting. Whitehawk shrank behind them. The cabin waited ahead. And for the first time, the road between was hers to travel without fear. The wagon creaked over frozen ruts as they left the courthouse behind. Snow blew sideways across the street, sweeping Pruitt's curses away into the wind. Ada didn't look back. Caleb didn't either. His jaw was set, steady as the reins in his hands. Noah sat between them, holding Ada's sleeve like an anchor. Lila rode in the back, wrapped in a quilt, watching the town shrink into pale distance. Whitehawk grew smaller with every turn of the wheels. What remained was the cold, the long road home, and the echo of the judge's gavel still settling inside Ada like dust after a storm. Halfway up the hill, Caleb broke the silence. "You did more than you were ever asked to," he said. His voice was low, not soft, just true. Most folks wouldn't have stood up there. Ada kept her eyes on the snow. Most folks didn't live through him. Caleb nodded once, accepting the weight of that truth. Wind pushed hard at the wagon. Caleb leaned into it, steering straight. Noah shivered. Ada wrapped an arm around him, drawing his head to her shoulder. His breath warmed the cloth of her coat. Far behind them, a church bell rang once more. Not for them. But it followed them anyway. At the ridge, the wind softened. Pines shielded the road, whispering in long, low breaths, as if the forest recognized them now, not as fugitives, but as survivors. "Should be home 'fore sundown," Caleb said. "Home," Noah echoed. Ada didn't correct him. The cabin appeared between the trees, roof lined with frost, smoke curling from the chimney, the cross above the door catching the last flash of sunlight. It looked the same as when they'd left that morning, but something in it felt different, something open, something waiting. Caleb tied off the reins. Snow crunched as they climbed down. Lila hopped from the back, stomping her boots. "I'll start the fire up again," she said. "It's still burning," Ada answered. "We banked it well." Lila grinned. "Still want to fuss with it." She ran inside. Caleb helped Noah down. "Let's get warm, son." Noah nodded and took Ada's hand. He didn't let go as they walked to the door. Inside, the air held the faint scent of last night's stew and the lingering warmth of banked coals. Ada hung their coats, brushed snow from Noah's hair, and fed another log into the stove. Caleb stood by the table, rubbing the cold from his hands. He watched Ada move, quiet, precise, the way someone moves when they're learning to trust the floor under their feet. "You hungry?" she asked. "A bit. There's bread left." "I know. I could smell it when we came in." Ada sliced 2 pieces. She set one on a plate before him, the other before Noah. Lila bounced into a chair and grabbed a piece without asking. Caleb gave her a look. She ignored it. Ada sat last. Bread cracked under their fingers. Butter softened. Snow hissed against the window like a tired animal. For a moment, it felt like the world believed in peace. Then Ada spoke. Caleb. He looked up. When the judge said Pruitt was guilty, I thought I'd feel different. How so? Lighter. You don't? Ada stared at her hands. It's not that I don't. It's that the weight changed places. Caleb leaned his forearms on the table. That's how truth works. It doesn't disappear. It moves. Goes where it's supposed to. Ada considered that. Noah chewed quietly, bell at his neck chiming soft with his movements. After a moment, Caleb added, You're not carrying it alone anymore. Ada didn't answer. She didn't need to. Noah leaned against her side, warm and small and alive. She touched his hair. That was answer enough. Dusk settled early. Caleb lit 2 lanterns, their glow spreading across the walls. Lila fetched blankets. Noah curled on the rocker. Ada stood by the window, watching the shadows gather along the tree line. Caleb noticed. Something out there? He asked. No, she said. Just quiet. Good quiet or bad quiet? Ada tilted her head. The snow had stopped. The sky was clear. The silence around the cabin didn't press. It held. Good, she said. Caleb stepped beside her, close enough that his sleeve brushed hers. Town looked at you different today. They didn't look through me, she said. That's something. Ada nodded. But they'll forget. Maybe, he said. But you won't. She turned toward him. Does that matter? It does to me. The words came simple, not meant to impress, meant to stand. Ada looked at him the way people look at light after too many years underground, slowly, carefully, as if afraid it might burn. Caleb didn't move, didn't reach for her. He let her have the space to choose. Noah's voice broke the quiet. Ada? She turned. Yes? Are we staying here forever? Ada walked to him. Kneeling beside the rocker, she cupped his cheek with her hand. Do you want to? She asked. He nodded, quick and small. It feels like God isn't so far away here. Ada's throat tightened. She pressed her forehead to his temple. We stay, she whispered. We stay as long as you want. Caleb watched them, Ada's hand trembling slightly as she stroked Noah's hair, Noah leaning into her touch, Lila pretending not to look, but watching with the full weight of someone who knew the shape of loss. He stepped to the stove, stirred the coals, and murmured, Then this house is yours too, Ada. She rose slowly. What did you say? Caleb faced her. House needs a name. needs people in it. I'm offering it, not asking anything back, just offering. Ada studied him. The lantern light caught the scar across his brow, the weary steadiness in his eyes, the waiting, not demanding, not claiming, not saving, offering. Noah stood at her side. Lila waited by the stove. The whole room felt like held breath. Ada looked at Mom, the floor, then at the walls, then at Caleb, and the decision arrived not like a shout, but like a quiet step into a room she'd feared too long. "I'll stay," she said, "if you'll have me." Caleb inhaled sharply, almost a laugh, almost a prayer. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I'll have you here." Ada walked to the table. She pulled off her gloves. She placed them down. And for the first time since the cellar, she did not reach for a scarf to hide her face. Her scars shone plainly in the lantern light. No one looked away. Outside, wind swept around the cabin, soft and harmless. Inside, the doors of the Reed house stayed open, and Ada stepped fully into a life that, for the first time, did not recoil from her shadow. Snow fell again that night, quiet as breath. Ada stood on the porch, arms folded against the cold. Frost glittered along the railing. Pine shadows stretched long over the yard, trembling every time the wind brushed them. Behind her, the cabin glowed warm and gold. Noah read by the stove, mouthing each word to himself. Lila mended a sleeve. Caleb moved slow and careful as he stoked the fire, favoring the leg he'd hurt weeks ago, though he refused to admit it. Ada watched him through the doorway. A man like him didn't belong in the dark spaces of her past. That was the danger, the closeness, the good she didn't trust. Caleb looked up and caught her staring. "You cold?" he asked. "A little. You've been standing out there a long time." Ada didn't move. She traced a hand over the rail. "I used to wait outside cellars like this, listening for footsteps." Caleb stepped into the doorway. Lantern light painted half his face. "No footsteps here," he said. "Just wind, and kids too loud to let danger sneak up." A thin laugh escaped her, more breath than sound. "That's true." He stepped onto the porch, but not too close. He never crossed the distance unless she allowed it. "You're thinking about Christmas," he said. Ada blinked. "What makes you think that?" "You've been looking at the cedar tree near the barn. Town folks hang ribbons on theirs. Lila said you touched that one twice today." Ada looked down at her hands. She hadn't noticed. "I don't know how to do Christmas anymore," she said. "You don't have to know," he replied. "Just have to be here." The wind shifted. Snowflakes tangled in her hair. Caleb didn't brush them away, just waited. Inside, Noah called, "Ada, bread's done." Ada stepped back toward the door. "Coming." But Caleb spoke again, quiet. "You did right today," he said. "Judge saw you. Town saw you. I saw you." Ada froze. Her breath whitened in the cold. He added, You don't have to hide that face no more. She touched the scar on her cheek out of habit. I'm not hiding. You're learning not to, he corrected softly. That's different. Ada walked inside before the heat in her chest got the best of her. After dinner, Noah fell asleep at the table, crumbs on his sleeve. Ada lifted him gently and carried him to the bed. Lila climbed the ladder to the loft, humming a tune she barely remembered. Caleb cleaned the table. Ada wiped down the counter. The room settled into that quiet that only winter cabins know, soft, deep, almost holy. When Ada hung the towel to dry, the lantern on the wall flickered. The draft slipped through a loose board. Caleb crossed the room and pressed a hand to the seam. Need to fix that before the cold gets worse. Ada moved beside him. I can help. He shook his head. You've done enough. I'm not a guest, Caleb. No, he said. You're not. They stood, close now, not touching, just sharing the same circle of lantern light. He spoke first. You said you'll stay, he said. Did you mean for the winter, or longer? Ada's pulse stilled. She had expected this sooner or later. Expected the question. Expected the world to ask more than she knew how to give. Longer, she said, if that's what fits. Caleb studied her, slowly, like a man checking the strength of a knot before trusting it with his weight. Fits, he repeated. I like that word. Ada didn't smile, but something loosened in her shoulders. He looked toward the stove. Kids'll want a tree for Christmas. Haven't cut one in years. I can help with that. You can, he said, but you don't have to. Ada stepped closer. I want to. Caleb's breath fogged between them. He lowered his voice. You keep choosing this house, he said, every day. Don't think I don't notice. I'm not choosing the house, Ada said softly. I'm choosing the people in it. The lantern flickered again. Snow hissed against the shutters. Caleb didn't reach for her, didn't touch her cheek, didn't ruin the fragile distance by taking more than she offered. Instead, he said, Then I'll make sure this roof holds for as many winters as you'll stay. Ada looked at him fully then, at the scar above his brow, at the strength in his jaw, at the gentleness buried under the rough edges of a man who'd learned too much about loss to risk grabbing anything too tightly. You already made it hold, she said. A log cracked in the stove. Sparks fluttered up the chimney. Caleb stepped aside to give her space as he always did. I'll fetch the tools in the morning. Patch this board up. Then we'll look for that tree. Ada nodded, though her thoughts were elsewhere. She wasn't planning escape routes anymore. She wasn't counting exits. Her hands weren't curled in fists. When Caleb turned, she spoke his name for the first time without hesitation. Caleb. He looked back quickly, as if he heard something in her voice he didn't dare hope for. Yeah? Thank you, she said, for not asking me to be more than I can. Caleb nodded once. I'll take whatever you give, whenever you give it. Ada's breath caught. Not fear, recognition. She opened the door to her room. Warm lamplight spilled over the floorboards. Before stepping inside, she looked at him one last time. "Good night," she said. "Night, Ada." She closed the door gently, not to shut him out, but to hold the moment between them without letting it fall apart. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the reed cabin stood firm, a house with open doors, a winter with room for healing, a man who waited without demanding, a woman learning to trust the quiet, and somewhere between them, a distance small enough for hope to walk across.